Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Lucas Nicholson had learned to trust his instincts in Afghanistan, where hesitation meant death and paranoia kept you breathing. 8 years after hanging up his Marine uniform, those instincts had dulled to background noise, until his 7-year-old daughter Emma grabbed his wrist with both hands and begged him not to leave. "Daddy, please don't go." Her brown eyes were wide, glossy with tears she was trying not to shed. "Something bad happens when you're gone." Lucas knelt on the hardwood floor of their Denver home, setting down his overnight bag. "Emmy, it's just 2 days. Grand Junction and back." "What's wrong?" She twisted the hem of her purple nightgown, her small fingers working the fabric into knots. "I don't know. I get scared at night when you're not here. Grandma Constance stays with you. And Mommy's here." Even as he said it, Lucas felt the words ring hollow. His wife Deborah had been distant lately, distracted. Their marriage had been unraveling slowly for months, though they'd kept up appearances for Emma's sake. "Grandma makes me more scared," Emma whispered, so quietly Lucas almost missed it. He pulled his daughter into his arms, felt her heartbeat racing against his chest like a trapped bird. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" But Emma just shook her head, burying her face in his shoulder. "Please stay, Daddy. Please." Lucas had signed the contract 3 weeks ago for the Grand Junction consultation. 2 days, $15,000 for his expertise in commercial architecture. The money would help, especially with Deborah's spending habits and her mother Constance's constant presence in their lives since moving from Phoenix 6 months ago. But looking at Emma's terrified face, the money suddenly seemed irrelevant. "Okay," he said softly. "I'll stay." Emma's entire body relaxed in his arms. She looked up at him with such pure relief that Lucas felt a cold finger trace down his spine. This wasn't normal childhood anxiety. This was something else. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lucas found Deborah in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with a glass of red wine. She barely looked up when he entered. "I canceled Grand Junction," Lucas said. Deborah's head snapped up, and for just a second, Lucas saw something flash across her face. Was it anger? Fear? Then it was gone, replaced by her usual practiced indifference. "Why would you do that?" "We need the money." Emma's scared. "She begged me not to go." Emma's 7 years old. She's scared of everything. Deborah took a long drink of wine. "You can't let a child dictate your business decisions, Lucas." "When did you become so cold?" The words came out harder than he'd intended. Deborah stood abruptly, the wine sloshing in her glass. "When did you become so weak? Your daughter manipulates you with tears, and you just fold. My mother was right about you." There it was again, Constance's influence, poisoning everything. Lucas had never liked his mother-in-law, a severe woman with calculating eyes and a smile that never reached them. She'd opposed their marriage from the start, calling Lucas a directionless veteran with PTSD, despite his successful architecture firm. When she'd announced she was moving to Denver to be closer to her only granddaughter, Lucas had felt a knot form in his stomach that had never quite loosened. What does Constance have to do with this? Nothing. Everything. "God, Lucas, I can't do this right now." Deborah brushed past him, heading upstairs. "Do whatever you want. You always do." Lucas stood alone in the kitchen, the house settling into nighttime quiet around him. Through the window, he could see the neighbor's porch light casting shadows across their backyard. Something was wrong. He'd felt it for weeks now, maybe months, but tonight Emma's fear had crystallized it into certainty. He pulled out his phone and called his brother Scott, who answered on the 3rd ring. "It's almost midnight, Luke. This better be good." "I need a favor," Lucas said quietly. "Can you come to my place tomorrow night?" "Around 10. Park down the street." "What's going on?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." The next morning, Lucas told Deborah he had to visit the Grand Junction client in person to explain the cancellation. She barely acknowledged him, absorbed in a hushed phone conversation that ended abruptly when he entered the room. He kissed Emma goodbye, promised her he'd be home for dinner, and left the house. But he didn't go to Grand Junction. Instead, Lucas drove to a storage unit across town and retrieved something he hadn't touched in 8 years, his old surveillance equipment from his military days. The Corps had taught him more than just how to build. They'd taught him how to watch, how to wait, and how to see patterns others missed. He spent the day at a coffee shop, setting up the equipment remotely. Tiny wireless cameras, no bigger than shirt buttons, each with night vision capability and motion activation. He'd planted them carefully before leaving that morning, One in the hallway outside Emma's room, one in the living room with a view of the front door, one covering the kitchen entrance. By 3 p.m., Lucas was watching his own home on a laptop screen from a booth in the back of the coffee shop. Deborah spent most of the afternoon on the phone, pacing the kitchen. Emma played alone in her room, occasionally looking toward the door with that same fearful expression that had convinced Lucas to stay. At 4:30 p.m., Constance arrived. Lucas watched his mother-in-law sweep into the house without knocking, her silver hair pulled back severely, her expression sharp. She spoke to Deborah in the kitchen. The camera had no audio, but Lucas could read body language. Constance was agitated, gesturing emphatically. Deborah looked nervous, defensive. Then Constance pulled out her phone and made a call. She spoke for less than a minute before hanging up and turning to Deborah with what looked like a satisfied smile. Lucas felt his jaw clench. Whatever was happening, Constance was orchestrating it. At 6 p.m., Lucas drove home. He walked through the front door to find Emma watching cartoons while Constance and Deborah sat in the kitchen, their conversation dying the moment he entered. "Lucas," Constance said with that razor-thin smile. "Deborah told me you canceled your business trip." "How unexpected." "Family comes first," Lucas said evenly. "Indeed." Constance's eyes were like chips of ice. "Though I wonder how you'll pay your bills with such noble sentiments." Deborah wouldn't meet his gaze. Emma ran to Lucas, wrapping her arms around his waist with desperate relief. He picked her up, feeling her trembling slightly. "I think I'll head home," Constance said, standing smoothly. "Deborah, dear, I'll see you tomorrow." "Actually, Mom, maybe you should," Deborah started, but Constance cut her off with a look. "Tomorrow," Constance repeated, and there was steel in her voice. "We'll finish our discussion." After she left, Lucas made dinner while Deborah retreated to their bedroom. Emma stayed close to him, helping him chop vegetables with a small plastic knife, gradually relaxing in his presence. "Daddy," she said as they ate spaghetti together at the kitchen table. "Are you going away again?" "No, baby. I'm staying right here." "Good." She twirled pasta around her fork, then looked up at him with those wise, worried eyes. "Grandma doesn't like you." "I know. She says bad things about you to Mommy." Lucas set down his fork carefully. "What kind of bad things?" Emma shrugged, suddenly interested in her plate. "That you're not good enough. That Mommy should find someone better." The words stung, but they didn't surprise him. Lucas had suspected Constance was working to sabotage his marriage, but hearing it confirmed by his 7-year-old daughter made his blood simmer. "Your grandma is wrong, Emmy. But thank you for telling me." That night, Lucas tucked Emma into bed and read her 3 stories instead of the usual one. She fought sleep, her hand gripping his tightly. "You'll be here all night?" she asked. "All night," he promised. "Even if Grandma comes." Lucas felt that cold finger trace his spine again. Why would Grandma come at night? But Emma was already asleep, her breathing evening out, her grip on his hand loosening. Lucas sat in the darkness of his daughter's room for a long time, listening to the house settle, thinking about what his little girl had said. Why would Grandma come at night? Unless she already had. By 10 p.m. the next evening, Lucas had told everyone he was leaving for Grand Junction at dawn and needed to sleep early. He'd made a show of packing his bag, kissing Emma goodnight, and retiring to the bedroom with Deborah, who'd barely spoken to him all day. At 10:30, he pretended to be asleep. At 10:45, Deborah slipped out of bed and tiptoed downstairs. Lucas waited exactly 3 minutes, then moved. His basement was unfinished, accessible through a door in the kitchen that Deborah rarely opened. Lucas had prepared it that afternoon, a folding chair positioned in the shadows beneath the stairs, his laptop open and connected to the cameras, his phone ready. He'd texted Scott to be in position by 11 p.m. Now he sat in the darkness, watching the feed from upstairs. Emma was asleep in her room, the hall camera showing her door closed. The living room camera showed Deborah sitting on the couch, her leg bouncing nervously, checking her phone every few seconds. At 10:58, headlights swept across the front windows. Lucas watched the screen as Deborah jumped up and went to the door. On camera, he saw her open it to reveal Constance, and 2 men Lucas had never seen before. The first was tall and lean with a shaved head and cold eyes, wearing an expensive suit that didn't hide the predatory way he moved. The second was shorter, thick-shouldered, with the look of someone who enjoyed causing pain. They walked into Lucas's home like they owned it. Constance spoke to Deborah, who nodded rapidly, wringing her hands. Then all four of them started walking toward the hallway, toward Emma's room. Lucas moved. He took the basement stairs silently, years of training making his footfalls soundless despite his size. He reached the kitchen just as they were halfway down the hall. Through the doorway, he could see them, Constance leading, the two men flanking her, Deborah trailing behind looking sick. "That's far enough," Lucas said. All four of them froze. Constance turned slowly, and for the first time since he'd met her, Lucas saw genuine fear flash across her face before she masked it with indignation. "Lucas, what are you doing up?" "I live here," he said quietly, stepping into the hallway. "The better question is, what are Jorge Allen and Carlton Daniels doing in my house at 11 o'clock at night, walking toward my daughter's bedroom?" The bald man, Jorge, stiffened at the use of his name. Carlton's hand moved toward his jacket, and Lucas shook his head slightly. "I wouldn't. My brother Scott is currently blocking your car in the driveway, and he's already called the police. They'll be here in about 4 minutes." It was a bluff. Scott was outside, but Lucas hadn't called the police yet. He wanted answers first. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Constance hissed, dropping all pretense of civility. "This is family business. My daughter is my family. You're just the poisonous snake who birthed my wife." Lucas looked at Deborah, who couldn't meet his eyes. "What's going on, Deborah? What are you involved in?" "She's involved in saving herself," Jorge said, his voice smooth and cultured. "Your wife has debts, Mr. Nicholson. Substantial debts. We've offered her a way to settle them. With my daughter." Lucas felt rage building in his chest, cold and focused. "You're trafficking her." "Such an ugly word," Constance said. "We prefer to think of it as specialized childcare. Certain wealthy individuals are willing to pay handsomely for time with special children. Emma would have simply had sleepovers with very generous people. She wouldn't have been harmed. Much." The casual evil of it stole Lucas's breath for a moment. He looked at his wife, the woman he'd married, the mother of his child, and saw a stranger. A weak, desperate stranger who'd been willing to sell their daughter to pay off gambling debts or whatever hole she'd dug herself into. "How long?" Lucas asked Deborah. "How long has this been planned?" 3 months, she whispered. "Mom said it was the only way. That we'd lose the house, lose everything. She said you'd never know. That Emma wouldn't remember." "Children always remember," Lucas said softly. "They just don't always have words for it." Carlton moved then, his hand going fully into his jacket, but Lucas was faster. 8 years of civilian life hadn't erased his training. He closed the distance in 2 steps, drove his elbow into Carlton's jaw, and had the man's own gun pressed under his chin before Jorge could react. "Don't," Lucas said to Jorge, who'd taken a step forward. "I spent 4 tours in Helmand Province. You're soft, rich predators who prey on children. You don't want to test me." The front door crashed open, and Scott burst in, 6'3" of former college linebacker, now a construction foreman, carrying a tire iron and looking like he wanted to use it. "Luke," Scott took in the scene. "Holy hell. Call the police," Lucas said. "Now. Tell them we have an attempted child abduction in progress, and that I have one perpetrator at gunpoint." "Lucas, please," Deborah sobbed. "I'm sorry. I was desperate. Mom said, your mother is a monster, and you let her turn you into one too." Lucas kept the gun steady, his eyes moving between Jorge and Constance. "How many families? How many children have you done this to?" "You self-righteous fool," Constance spat. "Do you think you're the first protective father? We've handled dozens of them. You can't prove anything." "Actually," Lucas said, "I can." He'd been recording everything. Every camera was running, every word captured. But more than that, he'd spent the day digging into Constance Dixon's background, and what he'd found would put them all away for decades. The police arrived 6 minutes later, 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, drawing neighbors to their windows. Lucas handed over Carlton's gun and calmly explained what he'd discovered. His mother-in-law running a child trafficking ring disguised as a placement agency for wealthy clients, using desperate mothers like Deborah to offer up their own children. The cameras had caught everything. Jorge and Carlton discussing prices, Constance outlining the plan, Deborah's weak acquiescence. It was all there, time-stamped and backed up to 3 different cloud servers. What the police didn't know yet was the deeper evidence Lucas had compiled. He'd found Constance's offshore accounts, transaction records showing dozens of payments from shadowy LLCs, and most damning, communications with other clients about other children. He'd spent 16 hours straight digging through the digital trail Constance thought she'd hidden. As the police led Constance and the two men away in handcuffs, the older woman turned to Lucas with pure hatred in her eyes. "You've ruined everything. Deborah will hate you for this." "Deborah's going to prison," Lucas said quietly. "And Emma is safe. That's all that matters." Deborah was arrested 20 minutes later, hysterical and blaming everyone but herself. Lucas watched dispassionately as they loaded her into a patrol car, then went upstairs to check on Emma. His daughter was still asleep, unaware of how close she'd come to a nightmare. Lucas sat on the edge of her bed, watching her peaceful face, and made a silent promise that he'd spend the rest of his life making sure nothing like this ever threatened her again. Scott appeared in the doorway. "The cops want a full statement. I told them you'd come down to the station in the morning." "Thanks for being here," Lucas said. "Are you kidding? I wouldn't have missed it." Scott paused. "What's going to happen to Emmy?" "She stays with me. Always." Lucas stood, looking down at his sleeping daughter one last time before quietly leaving the room. "Constance underestimated me. She thought I was just some weak architect she could manipulate through Deborah. She had no idea what I'm capable of when someone threatens my family." "What are you capable of?" Scott asked. Lucas smiled grimly. "Everything necessary." The full scope of Constance's operation emerged over the next 3 weeks. Federal agents raided her Phoenix properties and found evidence of a trafficking network spanning 4 states. Constance had been operating for over a decade, leveraging desperate mothers in financial crisis, preying on their weakness and shame. Jorge Allen and Carlton Daniels were mid-level operatives, talent scouts, and facilitators. They flipped on their suppliers and clients within 48 hours, terrified of the evidence Lucas had compiled. The FBI agent in charge, a woman named Chun who'd seen too many cases like this, told Lucas his documentation was the most thorough civilian investigation she'd encountered. "You could have been an analyst," she said, reviewing the spreadsheets and connection maps Lucas had created. "I just wanted to protect my daughter," Lucas replied. Deborah tried to cut a deal, claiming coercion and abuse from her mother. But the evidence was clear. She'd agreed to the plan, discussed logistics, even suggested the business trip timing. The prosecutor, a fierce woman named Martinez who'd made her career destroying monsters like Constance, offered no mercy. Lucas filed for divorce and sole custody the same day Deborah was formally charged. She didn't contest it. Her lawyer said she was broken, destroyed by the realization of what she'd almost done. Lucas felt nothing but contempt. Emma asked about her mother once, 2 weeks after the arrests. Lucas sat her down and explained, in age-appropriate terms, that Mommy had made very bad choices and would be away for a long time. Emma nodded solemnly. "Is Grandma Constance gone too?" she asked. "Yes, baby. Forever." "Good," Emma said simply. "She scared me. She'll never scare you again. I promise." But Lucas wasn't satisfied with just legal justice. Constance and her network were facing decades in prison, but Lucas wanted them to feel what they'd done to others. He wanted them to understand the fear, the violation, the helplessness they'd inflicted on children. So he started making calls. Lucas had maintained contacts from his Marine days, men and women who'd gone into various fields after service. One of them, a woman named Sarah who now worked in Bureau of Prisons, owed him her life after Kandahar. Another, a former intelligence analyst named Marcus, had built a successful consulting firm and maintained impressive connections. "I need information," Lucas told Marcus over an encrypted call, "about where Constance Dixon, Jorge Allen, and Carlton Daniels are being held pending trial." "Planning something illegal?" Marcus asked, but he was already typing. "Planning something poetic." Within 3 days, Lucas had detailed layouts of the detention facilities, guard schedules, and most importantly, inmate demographics and associations. He began orchestrating carefully, using proxies and intermediaries, making sure nothing could be traced back to him. Constance was in a federal detention center awaiting trial, housed in a unit with other women facing serious charges. Lucas arranged for certain information to be distributed among her fellow inmates, specifically, the nature of her crimes and the evidence against her. Child traffickers weren't popular anywhere, but in women's prisons, where many inmates were mothers separated from their own children, they were especially despised. Constance's life became hell. Women she'd never met destroyed her belongings, contaminated her food, made her every waking moment a gauntlet of hostility. The guards, informed through back channels about what she'd done, looked the other way. Jorge Allen was easier. He was in a minimum security facility, still arrogant, still thinking his lawyers would get him out. Lucas reached out to a journalist, one of the investigative reporters who'd covered the case, and fed her additional information about Jorge's victims. Names, stories, photographs of children whose lives he'd helped destroy. The article ran on a Sunday, front page, with Jorge's photo prominently featured. By Monday morning, Jorge had been moved to protective custody after someone leaked his location online and vigilantes showed up at the facility. His expensive lawyers quit en masse, unwilling to be associated with the public relations nightmare he'd become. Carlton Daniels was the most satisfying. He'd been placed in a medium security facility, and Lucas learned through Sarah that Carlton had been bragging to other inmates about his connections, about how he'd be out soon, about how the system couldn't touch him. Lucas arranged for Carlton to share a cell with a man named Deshaun Harris, a father serving 5 years for assault after beating a man who'd propositioned his teenage daughter. Sarah made sure the paperwork, accidentally, included details of Carlton's crimes. Carlton lasted 4 days before requesting protective custody. Deshaun had introduced him to what it felt like to be powerless, to be afraid, to have nowhere to run. Carlton's lawyer filed a motion citing unsafe conditions. The judge denied it. But Lucas's most careful orchestration was Deborah. She was the wild card, the mother who'd betrayed her own child, but who might still garner sympathy. He couldn't risk her getting a reduced sentence or serving minimal time. So Lucas built a case within the case. He documented every luxury purchase Deborah had made in the 3 months leading to the planned trafficking, designer clothes, spa treatments, expensive dinners, while claiming they were struggling financially. He found her offshore gambling accounts, showing she'd blown through nearly $200,000 of inherited money. He discovered she'd been planning to leave him anyway, that Emma was just collateral to solve her financial problems. He delivered all of it to Prosecutor Martinez anonymously, though she probably suspected the source. When Deborah's lawyer tried to paint her as a manipulated victim of her domineering mother, Martinez destroyed that narrative with evidence of Deborah's calculated selfishness. The trial was brutal. Lucas attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Scott beside him, watching Constance and her accomplices face justice. Emma stayed with Scott's wife during those weeks, sheltered from the media circus. The evidence was overwhelming. Lucas's surveillance footage played in court, Constance's casual description of specialized childcare, Jorge discussing prices, Carlton reaching for his gun. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Constance Dixon, 25 years for child trafficking, conspiracy, and RICO violations. She was 63, she'd likely die in prison. Jorge Allen, 18 years. His expensive suits and cultured voice meant nothing now. Carlton Daniels, 20 years, with additional charges pending in 2 other states. Deborah Nicholson, 12 years as part of a plea deal, with mandatory psychological evaluation. She'd be 50 before she saw freedom. Lucas felt nothing but cold satisfaction as the sentences were read. These monsters had tried to take his daughter, to violate her innocence, to destroy her life for money. Now they'd spend their remaining years in cages, suffering their own violations and indignities. After the trial, Prosecutor Martinez approached Lucas outside the courthouse. "You know they're going to have very difficult lives in prison, given their crimes." "Good," Lucas said simply. "Off the record, I admire what you did. The investigation, the evidence gathering. You made my case bulletproof." She paused. "On the record, I should warn you against any extracurricular involvement in their incarceration." "I don't know what you mean." Martinez smiled slightly. "Of course you don't. Take care of your daughter, Mr. Nicholson." 3 months after the trial ended, Lucas sold the house. Too many bad memories, too many ghosts. He and Emma moved to a quiet neighborhood in Boulder, to a smaller home with a fenced backyard and neighbors who didn't know their story. Emma started seeing a child psychologist, a kind woman who specialized in trauma. The sessions helped. Emma's nightmares became less frequent, her smiles more genuine. She never asked about Deborah or Constance again, and Lucas never brought them up. Scott visited every Sunday, usually bringing his wife Karen and their 2 kids. Emma loved her cousins, loved the normalcy of family barbecues and movie nights. Lucas watched his daughter slowly heal, saw her laughter return, and knew he'd made the right choices. On a Wednesday evening, 6 months after the trial, Lucas received a call from Sarah at the Bureau of Prisons. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "Constance Dixon was attacked in the yard yesterday. Broke her jaw, 3 ribs. She'll survive, but she's requested protective custody." "They approve it." "Request denied. Overcrowding." Lucas thanked her and hung up. He felt nothing but grim satisfaction. Constance had spent her life making others afraid. Now she knew what it felt like. That night, as Lucas tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him with those serious brown eyes. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Anything, baby." "Are the bad people really gone?" Lucas thought about Constance with her broken jaw, Jorge publicly destroyed, Carlton learning fear, Deborah locked away from society. "Yes," he said. "They're really gone. And they can never hurt you again. Because you protected me. Always. That's what dads do." Emma hugged him tight. "You're the best dad in the whole world." Lucas held his daughter, feeling her heartbeat steady and calm against his chest, and thought about the path that had led them here. He'd been a Marine, an architect, a husband. Now he was simply a father, the only role that truly mattered. The monsters were caged. The network was dismantled. Emma was safe. That was enough. But late at night, when Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Lucas sometimes opened his laptop and checked the updates Sarah sent him. Constance was in the infirmary again. Someone had thrown boiling water on her. Jorge had been beaten twice more. His expensive lawyer's withdrawal had made national news, destroying his reputation forever. Carlton had attempted suicide and was on watch. Deborah had tried to write to Emma once, a letter full of excuses and self-pity. Lucas burned it without reading it to his daughter. Deborah had lost the right to Emma's love when she'd agreed to sell her. Lucas knew some might say his actions after the arrests crossed lines. He'd manipulated prison placements, leaked information, orchestrated harassment. He'd gone beyond legal justice into something more primal. But he slept soundly at night. Because when someone threatens your child, when they conspire to violate them, to sell them, to destroy their innocence for profit, you don't just stop at a prison sentence. You make sure they understand the magnitude of their evil. You make sure they suffer proportionally to the suffering they intended to inflict. Lucas had learned in the Marines that sometimes violence was the answer, that sometimes mercy was weakness, that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to become more dangerous than the predators. He'd become exactly that dangerous. 1 year after the arrests, on Emma's 8th birthday, they had a party in their backyard. Scott's family, some of Emma's new friends from school, neighbors they'd grown close to. Emma laughed and played, opening presents and eating cake with chocolate smeared on her face. Lucas watched from the deck, Scott beside him with a beer. "She's doing great," Scott said. "You both are. We're surviving. More than that. She's thriving. You saved her, Luke." Lucas took a drink, watching his daughter chase one of Scott's kids around the yard, her laughter bright and genuine. "I almost didn't. If she hadn't begged me to stay, if I'd gone on that trip. But you didn't. You listened. You acted." Scott clapped him on the shoulder. "And those evil bastards are paying for it every day." Lucas thought about Constance, who'd lost teeth in her last attack. About Jorge, who'd been transferred to a harder facility after the media attention made him too notorious. About Carlton, still in protective custody, still terrified. About Deborah, isolated and despised even by other inmates who'd heard what she'd tried to do. "Yes," Lucas said quietly. "They are." That night, after the guests left and Emma was asleep, Lucas received an email from an encrypted address. It contained a news article about a major bust in Phoenix. Federal agents had dismantled the rest of Constance's network using information Lucas had provided. 17 arrests, 43 children recovered, operations spanning 6 states. The article quoted Agent Chun. "This investigation represents years of work, but the breakthrough came from a civilian who refused to let his daughter become a statistic. His diligence and courage saved countless children." Lucas closed the laptop. He'd done what needed to be done, not just for Emma, but for all the children Constance and her network would have destroyed. He went upstairs and looked in on his daughter. Emma slept peacefully, her stuffed bear clutched in her arms, safe in her room in their new house, in their new neighborhood. No grandmother to fear. No mother to betray her. Just Lucas, keeping watch, always vigilant. The monsters were in cages. The innocent were protected. Justice, real justice, Not just legal proceedings, but true cosmic balance had been served. Lucas Nicholson, former Marine and architect, had become something else when his daughter's life was threatened. He'd become judge, jury, and executioner. He'd used the system when it served him and gone around it when necessary. He'd been ruthless, calculating, and absolutely merciless. And he'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Because that's what fathers do. They protect their children from monsters. And when the monsters are too dangerous for conventional justice, fathers become something the monsters fear. Lucas turned off Emma's light and quietly closed her door. Tomorrow he'd take her to the park. They'd get ice cream and feed the ducks. They'd live their normal, quiet life. But if anyone ever threatened his daughter again, they'd learn what Constance and her accomplices had learned. That Lucas Nicholson was the wrong father to cross. That beneath his calm exterior was a warrior who would burn the world to keep his child safe. The scars from Afghanistan had taught him how to fight. The betrayal of his wife had taught him who to trust. The threat to his daughter had taught him that mercy was reserved for the innocent. And Lucas Nicholson had learned those lessons well. The story could have ended in tragedy. A child stolen in the night. A father who arrived home too late. A family destroyed by evil. Instead, it ended with a little girl sleeping safely, monsters locked away suffering daily torments, and a father who'd done whatever was necessary to protect his own. Some might call Lucas's actions excessive. He called them justice. And in the end, that was all that mattered. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.